Here are some of the best robberies ever done. Just wait until you find out how one crime was solved because of a sandwich left behind. Number 12, Banco Central. This robbery at Banco Central remains the biggest bank heist in Brazil. Allegedly, it involved at least 25 people who planned it out intensely for 3 months. And in 3 months, they came up with one of the most ingenious operations. They rented a building near the bank, posing as a landscaping company. That way, it didn't tip off the neighbors when they saw trucks carrying dirt and other sorts of debris every day from the building. However, the debris was actually coming from a tunnel that the group was digging that led right to Banco Central's vault. On August 6, 2005, the group finally hit the jackpot. As usual, they transported the $71 million hard cash in their trucks like they would with the debris they dug. And since it was a weekend, this mega heist wasn't discovered until Monday. To this day, much of the cash remains unaccounted for. Just a few of the gang members were ever arrested. Number 11, Dunbar Armored Facility. The Dunbar Armored Robbery remains the largest cash robbery in the U.S. The amount stolen in 1997 was close to $19 million in cash. But adjusted for inflation, it's slightly over $30 million in 2020. The heist is also notable since anyone that participated in the robbery were all caught, all thanks to one of them being too reckless with the cash. Much of the heist's success can be pinned on Dunbar Armored's employee Alan Pace. Pace took the time to write down every security detail of the premises and he shared it with his accomplices. Coincidentally, he actually got fired just a day before the robbery after he was caught messing around with the vehicles. When they decided to do the robbery, they knew exactly what to do and where to go. Pace knew exactly the right bags to pick, which are the bags with the highest denominations and non-sequential bills. The entire operation was over in just roughly half an hour. They made a clean escape, and it seemed like they'd completely get away. They laundered the cash through various things such as new homes, cars, and even a Texas business venture. But their freedom and newfound fortune were immediately cut short just 2 years later. One of the robbers stupidly gave out a stack of cash to his real estate broker with the original currency bands on the cash, raising suspicions. Number 10, CARLTON cans. In 2013, a number of French cities were hit with a whole bunch of jewelry heists. The Carlton Hotel exhibition was one of them, and by far the largest. It also happened right under everyone's noses in broad daylight. The daring thief turned up with his face covered with a hat and a scarf, all the while holding a pistol at guests and exhibitors at a private hair salon. The jewels were simply put on display by Israeli billionaire Lev Leviev. Interestingly, none of the guards at the exhibit were armed, so the robber peacefully made away with his loot that was estimated to be worth $136 million. To this day, not much progress has been made in their recovery, at least not in the public eye. No one knows who the lone gunman was and where he took the jewels. A $1.3 million reward was offered for anyone with information about the stolen jewels, but nothing has turned up yet. There were speculations that the heist might have been orchestrated by a high-profile member of the Pink Panthers, Milan Popovic, who had just escaped from a jail a few days prior. Number 9, Northern Bank. Carried out just days before Christmas in 2004, this robbery is among the biggest so far in British history. Instead of using their smarts, these thieves went for the good old-fashioned method of intimidation to get what they wanted. Posing as Northern Ireland police officers, the robbers abducted 2 Northern Bank officials and their families a day before the big robbery. The gang kept the 2 families hostage, but released the family members that were bank officials. They ordered the 2 to go to work as usual the next day. On the day of the robbery, the 2 bank officials remained at the bank premises after hours and let in members of the gang. From that point on, it was early Christmas for the robbers. They gained access to the bank's cash storage room. This room had a much larger amount of cash ready for ATMs in preparation for the festivities. For the robbers, it was just a matter of transporting the cash to a nearby waiting van. As soon as they got the cash, the gang released the abducted family members of the bank employees. Not a single one of the thieves have ever been convicted for the robbery. Number 8, Hatton Garden Safe Deposit. The April 2015 burglary of the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit in London was widely speculated as the largest in British history. The loss quoted in court was £14 million, but some media sources quote it to be well over 200 million pounds. A major part of this operation was all about drilling through walls and vaults. First, to access the premises, the gang drilled through a wall and then another wall that took them to the building's elevator shaft. From the elevator shaft, they traveled down to the building's basement using ropes. Once they were in the basement, they grabbed the drill again, this time drilling through the vault to where the jewelry was. Aside from the jewels, the gang managed to make away with millions in cash and gems by going through a total of 73 deposit boxes. The recovery has been tough, as just 4.5 million pounds of the stolen assets have been recovered as of 2020. Number 7. KNIGHTSBRIDGE Security Deposit. Pulling off a heist worth close to $100 million requires meticulous planning. But for the 1987 Knightsbridge security deposit robbery in London, this wasn't the case. Considering it's one of the biggest bank robberies in history, the theft was executed quite casually. On that day, the two main suspects entered the bank as any other customer would. They requested to open an account for a safe deposit box, and that's when their plan kicked in. Once they were into the vault, they drew their guns and held the bank's occupants hostage. Immediately, they put a close sign on the bank's door while letting in other heist members to assist with the operation. The gang managed to open a majority of the safe deposit boxes and made away with close to $98 million in cash and other valuable items. However, a fingerprint discovered at the bank led the police to Valerio Vici, already notorious bank robber before this robbery. Several of his accomplices were arrested, but he escaped to Latin America to enjoy the loot. He was later arrested, though, when he went back to England just so he could ship a Ferrari Testarossa he left behind. Was that worth the 22 years in prison he got? Number 6. Antwerp Diamonds. The Antwerp diamond heist is one of the most popular and largest jewelry robberies ever. It's been called the heist of the century at that time, but bigger jewelry robberies have happened since. It remains one of the most famous diamond heists to date because of how it was stolen with an advanced security system. The vault housing the jewels was protected by infrared heat detectors, a magnetic field, a seismic sensor, and a high-tech combination lock. That's it? Oh no, there's more. On top of all this, there were 18-inch steel doors to get through. Maybe the owner watched too many Ocean's 11 movies? However, on Valentine's Day of 2003, a gang led by Leonardo Notarbartolo breached this high-tech security system in Belgium's Diamond District. They had a $100 million payday in diamonds and other precious jewels. In addition to getting through such an advanced security system, they also had enough time to change the security tapes to avoid being identified. Despite all that, guess how they got caught? They left behind a half-eaten sandwich. That was more than enough DNA for investigators to use. After months of chasing across multiple countries, the group of 5 was arrested. The jewels, however, were never recovered. Number 5. Dar-es-Salaam's Investment Bank. The Dar-es-Salaam bank robbery in Baghdad is one of the biggest ever, but so little is known about the theft. With over $280 million in U.S. cash gone, the heist hardly received any news coverage. Local police authorities couldn't even seem to agree on what really happened. The morning after the robbery, employees of the bank came to work simply only to find the doors unlocked and the vault wide open with the money completely gone. Guards that normally slept at the bank had also disappeared. The local police claimed the heist was orchestrated by the 2 guards. The interior of the ministry, on the other hand, insisted that the cash was stolen by at least 3 people. None of the stolen cash has ever been recovered. Also, none of the people involved have ever been found or arrested. Number 4. Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. If you had over $500 million worth of art, you'd have really good security, wouldn't you? Apparently, the security situation at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, the security was extremely lacking for the amount of value inside the museum. The security measures were at least on par to that of regular museums, but improvements were needed for a museum with so many valuable collectibles. Somehow, the museum couldn't afford the improved measures, and making major renovations to the museum was against the late owner of the art's works, Isabella Stewart Gardner's wishes. In 1990, during St. Patrick's Day, 2 thieves disguised as police officers stole 13 priceless art pieces from the museum. The heist was so clean that the thieves left no evidence whatsoever. The museum has offered as much as $10 million for information that leads to the recovery of the paintings. The theft is unsolved to this day, and the frames where the paintings once hang remain empty as an homage to the missing pieces. Number 3. Securitas Depot. This heist remains the biggest known cash robbery in British history. In the world, it's dwarfed by only 2 other cash heists. In total, a little over £53 million were stolen back in February of 2006. The cash could have been much more, but the robbers actually ran out of time and space to carry away all the cash. According to reports, they had to abandon over £150 million. Here's an interesting fact. This robbery was masterminded by ex-UFC fighter Lee Murray. So how'd they do it? 2 of the thieves, dressed as police officers, they abducted the manager and his family before taking them to the cash depot. Here, they tied up the staff members and forced the manager to open cash cages. The whole operation took slightly over an hour with none of the hostages harmed. Now, too bad for the robbers, most of them were caught, with the first arrest coming just a few days after the robbery. A considerable part of the loot has also been recovered over the years. Number 2. Berliner Volksbank. Not much is known about this 2013 heist or the people that did it. Even the $10 million lost is just an estimate. However, how the robbers accessed the bank is known. They dug a 120-foot tunnel into the bank's vault from a nearby garage they had rented. After reaching the wall of the bank vault, they drilled a huge hole to the bank's steel wall. They opened close to 100 safety deposit boxes, stealing millions of dollars in cash and other valuables. Their tunnel was discovered after they set it on fire. This was done apparently to destroy any DNA evidence. Very little is known of who did it or what happened to the thieves. Number 1. Central Bank of Iraq. While most heists depend on smarts and a bit of violence, the Central Bank of Iraq was different. It was more of a withdrawal ordered by the highest authority in the country back then. Yep, Saddam Hussein. This was a few hours before the US invasion of Iraq. Saddam was probably sensing defeat even before the operation, so he gave his son a signed note. On it was an order for the bank to give his son a little over $1 billion worth of cash total, 900 million in US dollars and 100 million in euros. And the bank did just that. For close to 5 hours, Saddam's son, along with other unnamed individuals, transported the staggering amount of US dollars to an unknown location in vehicles. According to the New York Times, at least $650 million of the stash was recovered in one of Saddam's former palaces. Not much is known about the remaining amount. Find out how this girl made off with millions and never got caught. Except, there's a twist. Heather TALLCHIEF looked like the girl next door type of girl. She was pretty, she was young, and she had an innocent look about her. When she made off with over $4 million, her coworkers didn't even have any suspicion that she had something to do with it. They figured that she was kidnapped instead. And no, it wasn't that far-fetched to assume she was kidnapped. That's because kidnapping was an inherent risk with the type of job they had, which was being an armored car driver. They were responsible for transporting large amounts of cash. They just had no clue how cunning Heather actually was and what she was capable of. Just who exactly was Heather TALLCHIEF? Before Heather became America's most wanted woman, Heather TALLCHIEF moved to Las Vegas in 1993. She had needed a change. Before the Vegas move, she worked as a nurse at a hospice called Kimberly Quality Care Center in San Francisco. Her co-workers were sad that she was moving on. According to them, she had this amazing empathy with patients. Even the patients closest to leaving would be smiling when she left their bedside. But in the 14 months Heather worked in the hospice, she saw many patients go. She had become close friends to a few of them. Of course, this began to affect her. She began to be depressed because of her job. According to her mom, she began to wonder why she couldn't be happy. Heather didn't have the greatest circumstances in her life up to that point. She was born in Buffalo, New York, a place with sub-zero temperatures for 6 months out of the year. Heather hated every moment she spent in Buffalo. Almost every day she begged her mom, Ann, to leave. One day she got her wish. Ann TALLCHIEF packed up everything she owned and moved to San Francisco with Heather, leaving Heather's dad behind. And now Heather couldn't take everything falling apart at her work. She said she didn't want to worry about anything anymore. That's when she decided to uproot her entire life, move to Las Vegas. In Vegas, Heather decided on a strange career move. She applied for work as an armored vehicle driver supplying cash to casinos. How did she even get an interview for that job without any experience at all? She used her exceptional work record at the hospice to apply for jobs as an armored car driver. She also had perfect credit, and Kimberly gave her a glowing reference. She was way above the average for the industry. It may have looked like an odd choice to her interviewers, but she had a perfectly plausible explanation. She said she wanted a career in the security industries. She wanted to start at the bottom to learn the industry inside out. In a profession dominated by large men, she stood out. But that's the only thing she had against her. She easily passed the background criminal record check. Her references were perfect. She was on. She was hired at Loomis. At first, like most new drivers at Loomis, Heather was assigned to the casino house runs. This involved transporting new bills to thousands of gaming tables each day at different casinos. Even though this seems like it's really risky to the company and the casino, it wasn't. These new bills are easily traceable. These aren't the bills criminals want to be stuck with. Heather was patient. She had plenty of opportunities to go after the new bills, but she didn't go for it. She was waiting for a promotion. What she was waiting for were the ATM runs. That's where Loomis employees moved millions of dollars of used, unmarked bills. Those runs were given only to the most trusted employees. Somehow, within 6 months, Heather was just that. In her first weeks in her new job, Heather took a firing range test to qualify for a gun. The crazy thing was, she was really great at shooting. She shocked her coworkers by achieving record scores. Although she had 20/20 vision, Heather wore what looked like thick glasses whenever she was in her Loomis uniform. Heather also applied for admission at local law enforcement colleges, which increased the trust placed in her by Loomis. After just a couple months, Loomis felt that she had proved her innocence. Her diligence and reliability on the house runs had paid off. She was promoted to one of the riskier parts of the business at Loomis, ATM runs. 5 days a week, she would drive millions of dollars in unmarked bills to the strip. Heather's two closest co-workers were guards Steve Marshall and Scott Stewart. They rode with her in the armored truck and handled all the actual deliveries of the cash to the ATMs. They both liked her because she had made a considerable effort to be nice to them. She asked about their families, and she remembered details of their friends and kids. All that effort to be friends with them, along with her incredible charm, meant that she had Marshall and Stewart's total trust. Trust to the extent that they would allow her to drive the truck without them in certain circumstances. On the outside, everything looked normal. Here was a girl who was making a new start and a new career, and she was the model employee. But of course, you know that Heather had her own real plan. Before applying to work for Loomis, Heather's first move was to establish a series of fake IDs. What she would do was contact passport collectors. These were mostly guys who sold new passports from defunct countries such as Czechoslovakia. She would then go to small towns and get a driver's license in the name of her fake IDs. By the time she was in Vegas, she already had real driver's licenses in 12 different names. She also began applying for credit cards in the names of her new driving licenses. She took flying lessons as well, so she was in and out of the airports in Las Vegas. She took her first solo flight in a Cessna in August of 1993. Heather, however, wasn't hanging out in Las Vegas on her own. Her mom knew that she moved to Las Vegas with a man named Roberto Solis, and she had a bad feeling about him. That's because Roberto Solis is a convicted bank robber. He left prison early because he wrote poetry that got the attention of prominent literary figures in San Francisco. Supposedly, Heather wrote to him while he was in jail and arranged a meeting when he was released. Roberto and Heather lived together in a high-rise building in Las Vegas. High-rises in Vegas are places where people can just blend right in with plenty of privacy. Vegas is a place where people don't ask too many questions. A couple weeks before the big day, Heather, disguised as a nurse, pushed Roberto, disguised as a rich old guy in a wheelchair, onto a private jet at Las Vegas Airport. She was establishing a pattern that would remove suspicion after the robbery. On September 24th, Heather booked the same jet for a flight on October 1st. On September 18th, using the name Myra Calandra, Heather called an apartment building in Denver that specializes in furnished rentals business travel. She made a reservation for a couple weeks. At around the same time, she rented a garage in Las Vegas and registered it to a business called Reinforced Steel. She informed the owners that Reinforced Steel builds and repairs armored vehicles. Heather chose October 1st, 1993 as D-Day. Why that day? Heather knew the convention schedule. That day is when one convention started and another one just ended. It's when traffic is at its heaviest. Parking at some hotels, such as Circus and MGM Grand, became impossible. On that particular day, it was one of the biggest changeover days in 1993. Heather left the Loomis Depot early in the morning along with more than $6 million cash. By the time she arrived at the back of Circus Casino, there was over $4.5 million left. Her co-workers, Stewart and Marshall, were scheduled to put in $400,000 cash to 5 ATMs inside. Heather knew that it would take them at least 45 minutes. There wasn't any parking at the casino, just as Heather had predicted. They both agreed to let Heather meet them at the front of the hotel at 10:15, just like any other time. And that's when Heather took off for the garage reserved for Reinforced Steel, which definitely was not at the front of the Circus Casino. How many millions of dollars did she get away with? It's up for debate. Some newspapers say around $4 million, some newspapers say it's $3 million. The exact figure doesn't matter. What matters was that she disappeared with Roberto and they were nowhere to be found. From trash found in the garage, it's clear Heather had also planned how to get the money out of Las Vegas. Packing materials had showed that Heather had packed the cash into boxes and had the money shipped to Denver. Heather didn't seem particularly tense that morning, according to Stewart's later recollection, but her dressier shoes did strike him as out of the ordinary. He just thought that maybe she was going out to dinner or something after work and needed to get changed quickly. Roughly 2 hours later, at around 11 in the morning, Heather, using a fake nurse's ID, helped push Roberto onto his private jet at Las Vegas Airport. A short 12 minutes later, their plane pulled away and took off. As her plane was in the air, her co-workers were calling the Las Vegas Police Department. They were reporting that Heather had been kidnapped. Even the police thought that they'd find her body out in the desert. It was a full 2 weeks before the garage owner became suspicious, since their garage wasn't busy like usual. Inside, they found the Loomis truck, $3,000 in $1 bills, a pair of thick glasses, and packing material. It was another week before the FBI located the apartment building in Denver. And just like that, Heather TALLCHIEF disappeared for good. According to the FBI, her case is one of the largest armored robberies where the perpetrator wasn't brought to justice. And of course, things get even weirder. Police couldn't find Roberto or Heather for over a decade. Except one day, out of the blue, Heather showed up and surrendered at the federal courthouse in Las Vegas on September 15, 2005. Over the years, Las Vegas detectives were baffled at how Heather and her suspected accomplice Roberto had not been caught. They were about to find out. Heather told police she had been in Europe much of the time. Apparently, she never had access to the money except for a short while. She had been in Amsterdam working as a hotel maid for years. According to her, she was not the mastermind behind the crime. She claimed to be brainwashed by Roberto. She admitted to doing everything with Roberto, but she said that she couldn't help it. She claimed that Roberto constantly showed her tapes that hypnotized her after she met him. Apparently, the tapes made her receptive to his commands. He was the one who convinced her to move to Las Vegas. He was the one who told her to get work at Loomis. He was the one who planned the heist. He was the one who gave her all the instructions. According to Heather, she had followed Roberto's instructions like a robot, and she could remember very little about the planning. After driving off her route with the truck, she said she drove to a warehouse, but she didn't know what happened to the money she helped to pack. But why? Why on earth would she come turn herself in? Heather TALLCHIEF basically had a moment of clarity and felt bad about her role in the heist. She wanted to do the right thing and turn herself in. However, she didn't know where Roberto was, but here's another twist. They have a son together, but she left him after she learned she was pregnant because Roberto had not treated her well, especially after their son was born. She felt that it was best for her and her son to run on their own, something they did in Europe for roughly 10 years. But enough was enough. She was tired of running, and she wanted a chance for life for her then 10-year-old son if she did her time. Heather was sentenced to 63 months in prison. In June of 2010, she was released on parole. He would have gotten away with stealing Guy Fieri's Lambo, except he decided to do this instead. FLAVORTOWN Lambo. Imagine saying to yourself, you know what? Guy Fieri has a lot of money. He doesn't need his yellow Lambo anymore. I'm gonna go steal it. This is essentially what then 16-year-old Max Wade decided to do in 2011. Yep, this stolen yellow Lamborghini Gallardo belonged to the mayor of FLAVORTOWN, and he almost got away with it. In fact, he did get away with it, but he slipped up, almost as if on purpose. Who was Max Wade? Max Wade pretty much looked and seemed like any other teenager, except he was anything but. He had dropped out of high school in the 9th grade. It wasn't because he couldn't do the classes, he just didn't want to go to school anymore. He was actually quite smart, because the sophistication he showed in this heist was actually quite impressive for a 16-year-old kid. Before he dropped out of high school, he was already getting into trouble with the law. He had been investigated for allegedly detonating a stink bomb. He definitely had something against his mom because he had charges of battery against her and also charges for stealing her car. But the crime that showed off his business skills was his money-making scheme to sell fake IDs to his classmates. Apparently, he had already made 6 figures with that scheme by the time he did the heist. Pre-heist planning. Before Wade committed the actual crime, he spent weeks planning the heist of the Lamborghini. His computer history detailed just how dedicated he was to pulling the heist off. He found out on the internet how to jam a Lamborghini's auto theft prevention system called LoJack. He Googled instructions on how to pick a Lamborghini. He researched the place where he was going to steal the Lambo, British Motor Cars in San Francisco. He Googled the search phrase, Mission Impossible style rappelling, something that he actually did exactly. The heist. Wade got into the dealership early in the morning on March 8th, 2011. It's the middle of the night, really. Surveillance video catches the rope falling to the ground. Next thing on the screen you see is Wade scaling down the side of the building and into a window. That particular window was conveniently left unlocked. It's been theorized that Max was most likely working with someone on the inside, and that most likely person was the building's janitor. He wasn't supposed to be at work that late, but he was still somehow working at that time of night when the heist happened. And the crazy thing is, ever since the crime happened, detectives haven't been able to find him. Once he slipped in the window, Wade actually spent almost 15 minutes walking through the dealership. On the surveillance tape, it seemed like he had on a microphone and he looked like he was communicating to someone. He walks to the exit door and cuts the lock with bolt cutters. After that, he went straight for Guy's favorite Lamborghini and started the engine. He was able to drive out the door without tripping the dealership's motion sensors or perimeter alarms, something that was another mystery. Golden Gate Bridge cameras got surveillance of Guy Fieri's Lamborghini rolling through at 4:40 in the morning with the license plate Guy Toro. That was the last time the Lambo would be spotted with that license plate. When employees finally arrived at the dealership that same morning, they found the doors still raised. They also found all the evidence. The climbing rope was in a duffel bag along with a pry bar and bolt cutters. No one besides Wade has ever been arrested in the case. Even though he left all that evidence behind, no one knew who committed the crime. Police had no clue who did it. They even had a tip that Wade had the car and actually interviewed him, but they could not make a case. It was only gossip around his old high school that he had taken credit for the crime and had the car. But police couldn't find anyone that had actually seen the Lambo. Everything seemed to be in the clear at this point for Max. GTA life. If you have access to a Lamborghini, let's be for real, you definitely have some fun with it, right? Because that's exactly what Wade did. He drove it around town fearlessly. Guy Fieri often got reports of sightings of his Lambo. According to Fieri, he said, quote, "We would get calls all the time, and I mean all the time. I had friends call me who would say, 'Listen, I just saw your car on the freeway.'" People would report to police seeing a yellow Lamborghini, and Guy would hear reports about it from his lawyer, but that was the end of it. They couldn't pin it to anyone. Max Wade basically had gotten away with the crime, right? All he had to do was avoid getting pulled over. Or maybe he was smart enough to somehow come up with a fake registration and put it into the police system. However, Wade was a bit flashy. He did love driving the Lambo around, and he told friends that he did. He even texted a picture of the Lambo along with the text, quote, "Doesn't get any better than boosting a Lambo and picking up chicks at 17. After committing a serious crime, you'd lay low for a while, right? Well, not Max Wade. He wanted to push it to the limit. He wanted to throw a party, except it wasn't at his own place. Max wanted to throw it at the biggest, fanciest house in his old neighborhood. It was a $7 million, 7,450 square foot mansion at the highest point of Tiburon's Sugarloaf Drive. He knew that it was occupied for only part of the year, so of course, he decided to break in and throw a party. He told everyone that it was his house. He had plenty of cash and he drove a Lambo, so why wouldn't the kids who he threw the party for believe him? Throwing this party showed how much Wade wanted to be accepted. He didn't even know most of the kids that showed up. He was still susceptible to his human nature. Even with plenty of money, a stolen Lambo, and access to a huge mansion, he still had to be accepted by peers he didn't know. The downfall. So how exactly did police catch Wade? Well, they weren't exactly looking for him because of the Lambo. You see, what happened was that he had a little crush on someone that used to be his classmate, then 17-year-old Eva Dedier. Eva was one of Wade's potential fake ID customers, and that's when he started getting a crush on her. They texted back and forth, and Wade found out that she was seeing one of his old classmates, Landon Wallstrom. And this is where things took a weird turn. He planned this next crime on Friday, April the 13th of 2012. Wade is pulled up outside a house on a motorcycle, dressed in all black. He watches as Eva and Landon walk out of a house and climb into his pickup truck. And that's when Wade pulled up and started shooting. Luckily for them, Wade was a terrible shot, and he dropped the gun by accident. That allowed Eva and Landon to take off in the truck unhurt. Wade got away from the scene of the crime, and it looked like he was about to get away with it. But it was bad luck for Wade that the two detectives assigned to the case were motorcycle enthusiasts. They recognized the brand of the helmet Wade had on, called Built. This was a brand that could only be bought at special motorcycle stores. Detectives were able to find him on camera, filling up at a nearby gas station shortly before the shooting. Then detectives were able to find the store that Wade went to buy, matching his description from the gas station video. The motorcycle store had a clear video of him with his face clearly showing behind the helmet and the same black outfit he wore. Detectives showed Eva the video, and she identified the shooter as Wade. That was a wrap for him. The detectives now knew exactly who he was. But the problem is, they didn't have a current address for him, so they had to wait him out. But the funny thing is, after the shooting, Wade contacted Eva again about getting her a fake ID. He wanted to go out with her this bad. He even had offered to pick her up in the Lambo. He had no clue that she knew it was him, so she set up a date with him. Detectives and a team of 10 officers were waiting at their meeting spot, which was at a storage facility where Wade had a spot rented. And when Wade saw the officers, Wade ran. But officers were able to tackle and arrest him, and from then on, it was all over for him. The contents. Inside the storage unit, investigators found Guy's long-lost yellow Lamborghini. A sales contract found inside the locker showed that Wade had planned to ship the car out of Oakland and sell it to a dealership in the Dominican Republic. The storage unit also contained a fake San Francisco Police Department uniform, guns, ammunition, radio signal jammers, and other burglary equipment. Detectives found evidence that Wade was planning to steal around $6 million in merchandise from a San Francisco jewelry store in a heist that involved an escape by helicopter. It looked like Wade was going to go on an entire life of crime. More importantly, police found the motorcycle and the helmet he had used in the crime that they used to convict him. Wade had rented the storage unit under the name Carmine Colombo, which he had a fake ID for. You would think that for a guy who was smart enough to steal a Lambo in a sophisticated fashion, he'd be smart enough not to shoot some dude that was dating a girl he liked. But no, there's a lesson in here somewhere. It's probably something along the lines of teenagers will think like teenagers and you can't change human nature. Aftermath. But wait, it gets even better. After he was sent to jail, his friends actually tried to break him out of jail with a sledgehammer. His friends knew he was held at Marin County Juvenile Hall. So what'd they do? They decided to try to break him out at around 4:30 in the morning on a random Friday night. Staff members heard banging on the walls of the facility, so they went outside to see what was going on. They saw two kids out there with a sledgehammer, but they quickly ran and ended up not being caught. Police found holes cut into 2 perimeter fences, a sledgehammer, bolt cutters, and a damaged window at Wade's cell. Yes, for a few years this kid was living the real-life version of Grand Theft Auto. Here's the story of how one man robbed the Bellagio and how he just wanted to get caught. The Heist. The time was around 4 in the morning on an early Tuesday morning. It's the middle of December in 2010. Even for Vegas at this hour during December isn't a busy time. Anthony Carlillo had just ridden up to the Bellagio and parked his Suzuki motorcycle close to the valet stand. He backed his bike up next to a service path. He made sure to point the bike straight at the exit to Flamingo Road. Carlillo casually strolled into the Bellagio, but his heart was pounding hard. He wore dark overalls with gloves. He still has his motorcycle helmet on with the visor down. Inside his left pocket was a gun. He actually waved to a security guard walking around on duty. She was completely oblivious to what was about to happen. She even waved back at him. Carlillo quickly walked towards the high-limit craps table, one of the only tables open at that time. Quickly, he yelled, "Move, move!" The players and the dealers were surprised and jumped away from the table when they saw his gun. There were millions of dollars in chips on the table, and Carlillo began to grab all the chips he could. He shoveled handful after handful of chips into his backpack for roughly 15 seconds. But Carlillo would confess later that it felt like 15 years. Anthony Carlillo had just robbed the Bellagio for roughly $1.5 million in chips in less than 3 minutes. How did it get to this point? For Tony Carlillo, it all began with something he saw with his own eyes when he was in his early 20s. He was in Vegas in a casino and he was watching a man gamble. That gambler was betting on hard 8 at a craps table. That's a bet he would roll a pair of 4s before rolling a 7 or any other combination of 8. It's a bet with 10 to 1 odds of it happening, but he hit that first bet with only a $5 chip. Then he let the winnings ride and hit it again. And then he let it ride again on the same bet and hit again. On and on the man rolled and somehow avoided crapping out. To hit hard 8 once was improbable. To hit it 4 times in a row is almost a once-in-a-lifetime event. The man cashed out $50,000 off of just a single $5 chip. What he saw with his own eyes is what inspired Tony. He had a belief that as long as you have the guts to let the universe dictate your fate, there's no telling what might come your way. Well, in his case, that was definitely true. Anthony Carlillo's first heist was not the Bellagio robbery. Just 5 days earlier, he had done his first heist at the Suncoast Casino. He held up the Suncoast poker room for a little bit over $19,000 in cash in pretty much the same way as he did the Bellagio. Why the Suncoast poker room? It was because he was a new regular in the poker games there. The problem was that he was a losing player, and he couldn't afford playing in the games anymore because of how much he had lost playing poker. Gambling wasn't what Carlillo was good at. In fact, he knew he was not good at poker, but he was determined to change his luck. So he did the next best thing in his mind, and that was to rob the poker game. Carlillo went to Las Vegas with a dream of a new life. He had previously tried to make his mark in rental real estate back in Colorado in the mid-2000s, but then the financial crisis hit and he was underwater on all his mortgages. He was in foreclosure for 4 different properties. He had listed assets of roughly $212,000, but
he had liabilities of more than $356,000. So in May 2009, he filed for bankruptcy and looked for a new life out west. This was his way of letting the universe dictate his fate. By gutting his underwater houses of anything valuable, he was able to leave his Colorado life behind with $30,000 cash. He had dreams of being a doctor, so he registered for classes at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. He wanted to walk a straight and narrow path, kind of like his dad, Las Vegas Municipal Judge George Assad. You may be wondering, how come their last names are different? His parents had split up and he took on his stepfather's last name when he had moved out to Colorado. But that was a previous lifetime. Right now, Carleo was looking to carve a new identity. The problem for Tony was that he was impatient. He wanted success too quickly, and he was way too distracted. He was able to only hold things together for 2 semesters at UNLV before the all-too-common Vegas party lifestyle took over. In late November of 2010 was when things started falling apart for Carleo. This was during a 2-week Thanksgiving break from classes. Instead of his usual partying, he started gambling. He played poker and other table games at the Suncoast Casino that was close to his house. That was the decision that determined his fate in life. He quickly lost half of his savings gambling in just a few days. And being the impatient and impulsive person he was, he wanted to make his money back quickly. He took his last $12,000 to the Bellagio and entered a high-stakes poker game. The poker pros at the Bellagio were loving it. In a matter of hours, he lost the rest of his bankroll. He had no money left. No, this wasn't when he decided to go into crime just yet. He still had to hit rock bottom. After losing everything just the night before, Carleo was able to scrape together $800 the very next morning by selling prescription medicine he had. And then he drove straight back to the Bellagio to gamble. But turning $800 into $30,000 is a pipe dream. He wasn't good at poker, and he certainly wasn't lucky in any other games. He quickly lost the rest of that money too. What Carleo had wanted was right in front of him. On every blackjack and craps table were hundreds of thousands of dollars just sitting in the open. He started thinking how easy it is to just reach over and grab the chips. He still believed that he could turn his luck around. He still wanted to gamble, but he just didn't have money. At this point, he couldn't even afford to get into the low-stakes poker games at Suncoast. A few nights after his Bellagio gambling disaster, his fantasy of grabbing chips came true first at the Suncoast Casino. Because of how easy it was for him to rob the Suncoast poker room, he got the idea for holding up the Bellagio craps table. Doing his first heist made him realize how easy it was. All it took was literally a couple of minutes and a quick exit. The hardest part was actually just getting himself to do it. By robbing the Bellagio, Carleo had achieved something he hadn't been able to do ever. He had made money all by himself, even if it was illegal. And he was now a millionaire. And this fed his ego, an ego that became his downfall. Now remember, he had only casino chips. If you guys don't know much about the way chips work, we'll give you the inside scoop. Not just anyone can cash high-denomination chips. Anything below a $500 chip, sure, no problem. Even a $500 chip, sure, why not? But start having 1K and 5K chips, dealers are going to remember who you are. And depending on the casino, they track different high-denomination chips. Some casinos will track people getting chips as low as 1K. Carleo would have to hand chips to Bellagio cashiers and hope they just give him cash. And obviously, he can't cash in $1.5 million in chips all at once. He would have to do it over and over again. But to be honest, it could be done. It's not easy, but it could be done if he had patience. All he needed to do was not attract attention to himself. So what exactly did he do? The exact opposite. Carleo was back the very next day at the Bellagio, but to his surprise, no one recognized him. Nothing was different at the Bellagio. It was just like any other day at the casino. Except for Carleo, he had a lot more money on him. He went ahead and sat down at a high-stakes poker game. He had a bunch of $100 bills from the earlier Suncoast robbery. To be honest, what Carleo did actually wasn't that bad. Showing up at the casino to start washing his chips slowly is actually the right plan. Here's the thing though, you can't cash in chips without gambling. Maybe once or twice you can show up and people wouldn't think anything. But as we mentioned earlier, it's not possible to cash in all his chips at once. And if you're consistently cashing in chips, then you have to gamble, or else the employees are going to start catching on that something's not right. Playing high-stakes poker is actually the perfect ruse. All he has to do is buy in a few times using a combination of real cash and chips. During the time in Vegas, cash played on the table. Once he's done with his session, he can chip up, as a lot of poker players do, because carrying around a ton of chips is cumbersome. That way, he can slowly start watching the big chips. And oh yeah, this plan only works assuming he was at least a break-even poker player. Throughout the night, Carlito slipped a few stolen $5,000 chips into his poker stack. The Bellagio doesn't bother to track who wins and who loses at poker. It's too complicated. Casinos only track who's been playing what game and at what table via a player's card. Carlito probably knew that he had to use his player's card while gambling, because literally every single regular high-stakes gambler uses a player's card. That's because every player wants to earn comps at the casino. Because he's been playing poker, at the end of the night he had no trouble cashing out, even though the cashier asked to check his ID and player's card. The poker room was the safest place to launder his chips. But remember we said earlier that Carlito had no patience? Even in the success of getting away with a robbery, he wanted everything too fast. It was only a couple of nights later before he began looking for bigger action. He found his way to the craps pits, to table number 5, the exact same table he had just robbed days earlier. Just why? Why would he do this? Was this his subconscious wanting to get caught? Was it about the money, or was it about the ego for him? At this point, the story of the biker bandit was all over the news. Carlito was on local TV everywhere. Every local news station had already aired the surveillance tape of him robbing the Bellagio. People gambling were talking about him. And for Carlito, it gave him a thrill because it gave him status. He admitted himself in interviews that he liked listening to other people telling the stories. But it probably ate him alive that he couldn't tell everyone that it was him who actually did it. Everyone had their own theory on how smart the bandit actually was and what he would do after the robbery. Carlito began gambling in the pits like a high roller. He was playing big, and he attracted attention. The staff at the Bellagio began noticing him, but they didn't think that he was the biker bandit or anything. They just wanted to make sure he kept on gambling big. Casinos keep high rollers playing by comping them. They'll give them sweets, free food, and tickets to shows just to keep them at the casino. Carlito was assigned his own casino host, a usual tactic for anyone gambling a lot. They comped him expensive dinners and $600 a night suites, and he loved playing the role of the high roller. Carlito couldn't tell anything was wrong, and he was living the life. None of the dealers, pit bosses, or security guards treated him any differently from the other gamblers, and he had a lot of chips that he could toss around in the Bellagio. He felt that he was in the clear, and he was, for now. Over the next several weeks, Carlito blew thousands of dollars partying, but that wasn't his real problem. His biggest issue? It was gambling. He wouldn't be careful with the chips that he had. He never treated the chips as if they were real cash. All he wanted to do at that point was just play the part of being a big gambler. He was already living what he wanted in life, even if it was fake. The problem for Carlito was that he had more than $1 million in cranberry chips, roughly $1.1 million. Cranberry chips were worth $25,000 a piece. These were only used by people who were the biggest of the big high rollers. Bellagio had every single person whom they had given cranberry chips before in a database. Needless to say, Carlito was not on the list, so basically, his $1.1 million worth of chips were worthless. He really only had around $400,000 he could launder and use outside the casino. Carlito should have been smart. He should have thought about his heist as a $400,000 heist and just threw away the cranberry chips. An almost $500,000 score is a big score for any thief, especially for someone that just got into it. He should have known that he would be giving up his life if he tried to cash in the cranberries. Anyone he tried to launder the chips through would immediately hold immense power over him. Although getting on the list of high rollers is possible, it's still extremely risky. He was at least smart enough to know that trying to cash a single cranberry chip would immediately raise suspicions. He should have been patient and played the part of high roller for much longer, but he acted with very little restraint. He didn't make the smart or safe play. For example, on New Year's Eve of that year, Carlito flew an old friend named Alex up from Colorado for a visit. That night, Alex watched him bet $10,000 a hand on blackjack, and losing repeatedly. Alex tried to stop him, but Carlillo couldn't stop himself as he kept on chasing his losses. When the new year rang in, he was still firing off big bets. Eventually, he lost all the chips and money he had on him, over $100,000. That was just one example. Carlillo was losing money and losing it fast. It's only been a little over 2 weeks since he pulled off his heist. In the meantime, Las Vegas detectives Sam Smith and Jason Nelson were going through all their leads in their hunt, but they kept on hitting dead ends. They were getting plenty of leads, but none of them made sense, and none of them pointed towards Carlillo. Then the detectives met a man they call Leo. Leo was a poker dealer at the Bellagio. He said that he knew who the robber was. Leo was from Jersey, and apparently he reminded the detectives of the Joe Pesci character from the Lethal Weapon movies, and that's why they called him Leo. Leo said that in the days leading up to the robbery, he had spoken with a poker player who had lost his bankroll, and he had shared a fantasy he had of stealing casino chips. He didn't think anything of it. A week later, Leo saw the same poker player again, except this time, only now he seemed to have come into a lot of money. He was sitting in games he could have never been able to afford before. Leo started playing detective, and he began talking to other dealers. He talked to cashiers to confirm his suspicion that the poker player was buying in with chips and not cash. Leo told the detectives the man's name. After the heist, Carlillo barely left the Bellagio. The only times he would leave was to pick up stolen chips he had stashed around town or to unload cash into a safety deposit box at a bank. At one point, the box held more than $100,000 in cash. But after the New Year's Eve fiasco, he was down to his last $20,000 cash. Of the roughly $400,000 of easily convertible chips he had gotten from his heist, just a single 5K chip remained. He basically was back to his original point, except this time he was a wanted man. Because he was strapped for cash, his fantasies took over again. He fantasized about cutting a deal with someone, such as famous poker pro Phil Ivey, someone the Bellagio could conceivably believe had access to a major bankroll. Carlillo wasn't the only one trying to solve the puzzle. Poker players on poker forums were discussing the Bellagio heist and what the robber could do with the stolen chips. He actually followed the discussions closely and even went as far as creating an account on forums. He was so naive and egotistical, he chose his screen name as Ocean Spray 25 and listed his location as Granada on the biggest poker forum in the world, 2plus2.com. One day, Matthew Brooks, a recreational player in Virginia, posted a hypothetical question. How many cranberries would you trade for a legit 5K chip? Carlillo began messaging Brooks with private messages. He asked Brooks if he would trade 4 5K chips for 3 cranberry chips. Brooks didn't know how seriously to take him. He was thinking that no one would actually be that dumb, right? In one of his messages, Carlillo gave him a number to call. So Brooks called him up out of sheer curiosity. During the call, Carlillo shared with him the exact details about the robbery. Just why? He could have just said he stole some chips off some high roller. Brooks asked for proof that he was indeed the Bellagio Bandit. So Carlillo emailed Brooks a picture of 2 cranberry chips resting on a piece of paper signed Biker Bandits. If that's not wanting to be caught, then we don't know what is. Detective Nelsons and Smith got their best lead from Leo. They learned that Carlillo held a Class M license to drive a motorcycle. They learned that he had declared bankruptcy a year before. They learned that all of a sudden he had started gambling for big money. It was just red flag after red flag after red flag. Nelson also turned up one more fact. They figured out that his dad was a sitting Las Vegas judge, George Assad. They knew that if they were not right, their careers were pretty much going to go nowhere. On January 13th, Las Vegas detectives put a trap and trace on Carlillo's cell phone to log all of his incoming and outgoing calls. A week later, they pulled all his player records. In the 4 years leading up to the robbery, Carlillo had lost a total of $2,900 at the casino. Since the robbery, he had lost $105,000. By that time, they knew that he was the bandit. But knowing and proving are two different things. Brooks still couldn't believe what he got from Carlillo. Obviously, he didn't have any 5K Bellagio chips. He came to realize that he was talking to the real Bellagio bandit. He forwarded the photo Carlillo gave him to the Bellagio and to the Las Vegas police. The IP address attached to the email revealed that it was sent from the house of Judge George Assad. A few days later, Carlillo was at the Venetian playing in a $1,500 buy-in poker tournament. During the dinner break, a stranger came up and sat at his table. The man knew the poker dealer and made small talk, but he also began introducing himself to Carlillo. Kian Kava was a local doctor, and somewhere he had heard that Carlillo had $25,000 chips for sale. Carlito made absolutely no connection between the doctor and what he had revealed to Brooks on email and over the phone. It wasn't too long before he agreed to meet with Dr. Cava and a connected guy from New Jersey named Dominic, who would be a buyer of cranberry chips. Dominic worked in the loan sharking business back east and was thinking of starting up a crew out in Las Vegas. Carlito started off being very cautious and suspicious. When Dominic offered him $10,000 in cash right then and there for a cranberry chip, Carlito actually wouldn't take it. Carlito met with Dominic repeatedly over the next few days and gradually came to trust him. They played blackjack together and traded text messages about which college football games to bet on. Over expensive steak dinners and gambling together, they discussed the deal for cranberry chips. On January 30th, Dominic slid a wine list menu across the table to Carlito over dinner. Inside the menu was $10,000 in cash and some smaller chips. Carlito pocketed the money and passed a $25,000 chip back to Dominic. Carlito would sell a total of $100,000 worth of cranberry chips over the course of the next 2 days. On February 2nd, they met one last time in a Bellagio bathroom. 6 Vegas police officers stormed through the bathroom door and yelled at Carlito to get on the floor. The dream was over. Dominic was actually a Las Vegas police officer named Mike Gennaro. Dr. Cavall was actually a real medical doctor. He was just a friend of Gennaro's and also a casual poker player who had agreed to help. The money and chips Gennaro used to gamble with and buy Carlito's cranberries had been loaned to him by the Bellagio itself. Just 7 weeks after Carlito's big heist, he was now in handcuffs, and his dad was voted off the bench before his sentencing. He ended up getting between 9 and 27 years in prison for the Bellagio heist and the Suncoast robbery. The earliest he can get out is around the end of 2020. In another universe, he gambled at the Bellagio a little bit every day like a lot of gamblers in Vegas do. He was smart and he realized that he didn't need to start off so big. That way no one in his life had any suspicion. He never told anyone about the robbery, and he certainly didn't flaunt any big chips. He worked his way up in the poker room and moved through the stakes each year. And you know what? He actually became decent over time. To anyone in the poker room, he wasn't crushing the game, but he was good enough to move up the stakes each year. And a mid-stakes poker player making 6 figures a year in Las Vegas isn't anything unusual. Carlito was just like any other poker player in Vegas. He was a consistent winner who liked to gamble a little bit of his poker winnings in the pits from time to time. He washed his chips from the heist at the Bellagio over a course of 5 years, and he even hit it big a few times at blackjack on the nights he had big wins at poker. And he was able to color up his chips to get on the cranberry list. And eventually, over time, he was just another high roller who had made his money through poker. But of course, this is Carlito in another universe. Watch this next video to find out about the untold truth about the escape from Alcatraz.